Hi there, my name is Deb Blum, and I'm here today to answer a specific question that I was asked. I was asked, how is it that focusing on self-love doesn't lead to an over-focus on ourselves in like kind of an egotistical kind of place in our lives? And I have an answer for that. So here's how I look at how I look at who we are when we are not self-loving. So when when you go back in time to when you were a child, you very few people got all of their emotional and attachment needs met. So most of us were left kind of longing, like wishing we were, more loved, or somebody heard us or saw us or was more attentive to us or met our needs. And so because most of us didn't get our needs fully met, we spend the rest of our lives looking outside to the outside world to meet our needs. So what looks often like a kind and generous thing that we do is many times ultimately deep down inside is us trying to get our needs met. So like, for example, a person might feel kind of insecure, and so maybe they feel insecure about a relationship. So they maybe do something nice, like they send them a text message and ask them how their day is. And it looks like that's being very outwardly focused and generous with their love. But actually, what they were really doing was checking in to see if they were safe. So they asked how they were doing, the other person responded, and they got to feel, oh, good, I wasn't abandoned, right? So they're trying to get their needs met. We can see that often in people pleasing. So people are really nice and kind and, doing what the other person wants them to do, but it's often with the intention of meeting our own need of feeling safe or secure, or maybe to get connection or to get affection or something. So we are often doing something in order to get something because our little inner child, our young self, is still longing to get our needs met. So, um, those things aren't bad. They're not bad things, except for that to some degree they are really not ever getting to the root of what's going on with us, which is that we have unfulfilled attachment needs. We have places in us where we have we have needs we want to get met. And I'm not ever saying that those needs are like, I don't want to ever discount needs. We all have needs. But what happens is we often orient to the external to get our needs met with this idea that that is where you're supposed to get your needs met. And that's partially kind of just gets kind of like set in stone as a child because we were always longing to get our needs met. The belief, like, so the way that I understand attachment needs is that if our attachment needs were met by our parents or our caregivers when we were very young in that 0 to 6 or 7 year time frame, then actually we would feel filled. We would have our cup full. We wouldn't have holes in our soul. And we would go out into the world and we would feel a foundation of love, like of kind of self-love and attachment to self. Okay? And even attachment to our parents. So we would know that we are grounded in this. But because most of us don't and we have attachment wounds, we have to go back and shore up those attachment wounds. And much of that is through a process of self-love, which is self-love to me is one of the things is I kind of think I have to redefine self-love because I think a lot of people look at self-love as something that's like self-care, like oh, I take care of myself. I prioritize myself. Or like you see your good qualities and you're like, oh, I'm a good person. Well, here are the things I like about myself. I'm kind. I'm generous. I'm a good artist. I'm smart. I have created a business. I am a pretty good mom. I'm a good cook. And we go through that and we think self-love is that, which that is an important step. I kind of look at it as self-care is the first thing, which is, oh, I'm a person worthy of taking care of. That's a first priority of self-love. Then we go to self-love, which is like kind of 101, which is the coming into reality that it's okay to like yourself. Because we live in a society that says that it's arrogant and self-absorbed if you like yourself. And or if you say like we all get trained that the polite thing to do is self-deprecate, is to be humble. Like it's not even humility. That's actually like It's like this thing, like we don't want to make another person feel bad by just taking a compliment. So we all have to learn how to take compliments, how to be like happy about our lives, to be happy about who we are. But then there are these other pieces, and they're the harder parts of self-love, which is where we start to take responsibility, deeply, deeply take responsibility for um, our own needs. So, in other words, we literally have to meet some of our own needs. So, like if we want to be heard in the world, we need to begin to listen to ourselves through journaling, through self talk that is conscious, intentional self talk, not that mind chatter that we all have. Um, we have to also listen to other people because what the outside world does reflect our inner world, and vice versa. And so what happens is if you are not listening to others but you want to be listened to, you have to actually shore that up. So that would mean you have to listen to yourself and listen to others in order to create the energy of listening as a priority, as I am valuable enough to be heard, and I believe other people are valuable enough to be heard. Same goes for even attention. Like if you want attention, sometimes we have to actually meet our own needs for that, like give ourselves attention. But there's also the other pieces, the courageous act of asking to get our needs met without expecting them to meet them, without needing to manipulate other people to get our needs met. And I say use the word manipulation with the greatest, greatest love because we all do it. Manipulation gets a bad name, but actually we're all sort of doing little micro things and even sometimes macro things. And at the end of the day, we're just trying to get our needs met. We have this like feeling inside of anxiety or fear, and we're like, oh, and we just do things to get our needs met. And it works. It's a strategy that often works. But ultimately, it's not really an integrity. It's kind of this idea of like, it's kind of a codependency. It's sort of like other people are supposed to meet my needs. So I do these little teeny things, and then they play a game along with me. And we all kind of do these little things. And we all like, oh, I play nice with you, and I play nice with you. And we have these unwritten agreements. Instead of coming from consciousness, which is to say, I am going to be honest that like right now I have a need for affection. And the other person gets a chance to be able to say, oh, like, I really want to meet your need, and I have a need to get work done right now. And I can't, but in about an hour, I would love to snuggle on the couch with you. Would you be up for that? So you start to it's courageous though, because it takes the risk. You have to take a risk that you might be disappointed. You might not get your need met. And you went out on a limb to ask for that need to be met. But vice versa, what we do is we then become in integrity with ourselves when another person needs something from us, and we say, oh, wait a second, I'm not going to abandon myself just to do that thing for that person, but let me just check in and see, like, oh yeah, I would love to be generous and give that to that person right now. And so we pay attention to that. We do deeply care about the other people, and we want to meet the needs of other people, and we want our needs met, but we don't come into it from this place of this young child place where we're trying to get our needs met and we think the other person is supposed to meet our needs. It's more like adult relationships where it's like, oh, I want to meet that person's needs. I want to be that for that person, and vice versa. So that's another piece, which is the part about, so there's the part about meeting our own needs. There's the part about being courageous enough to ask to get our needs met. There's the part about being courageous enough to set a boundary to say this is not okay, and I'm not going to I love myself too much to be treated this way. And that's a hard one too, because what we do then is we disappoint other people. So egotistical, so it's a kind of this interesting thing, and there's more to say in this, but this is interesting thing that people think that self-love is going to make us egotistical because we aren't going to just sacrifice ourselves anymore. But I kind of think self-sacrifice is egotistical because this is kind of interesting thing, right? When we are when we're being nice to other people because kind of deep down inside we want to get some need met in ourselves, isn't that kind of egotistical? Isn't it sort of self-absorbed of us? Like, I actually believe the antidote to being self-absorbed is self-love. Because the reason why we're self-absorbed is because we're so absorbed with our pain. We're so absorbed with our needs. We're so absorbed with our how we are perceived in the world. We're so absorbed with validation that we are our own self, validation that we orient the outside world, and we basically create our world as if we are the most important in the world. We like our needs need to get met now. I'm a victim. I need this. The world is here to meet my needs. I mean, to me, it is in not loving ourselves that we literally become like a victimized person walking around watching for if people are meeting our needs. When we are deeply in love with ourselves, we don't need other people to validate us in that way anymore because we already do it for ourselves. We feel tapped in and tuned in to ourselves. We are listening to ourselves. We are showing up in the world in integrity with the truth of who we are. Who else should we be in integrity with? Who else? What? Some outside determined rules like, oh, I should be in integrity with what the government has decided is good, or what Hollywood has decided is like beautiful, or what the media has decided is good behavior, or even what our parents decided was good behavior, or our religions. I believe inside of us, every one of us has an inner compass of what's in integrity, and that's what we want to show up with, is integrity with self. I always say to people, when in doubt, be you, because that's the only thing you're going to know for a fact. Everything else is all just other people's opinions, other people's guesses on what's right and wrong in this world. So when I think about self-love, self-love is truly, really, it's about healing all of the places along the way where we believed we're not enough, we're not worthy, we're not okay the way we are, the way we think isn't okay. We don't know, we need to rely on other people, like as if we don't know. Like as if there's no true north inside of us. Each one of us is born, comes here with a true north, with a strong inner compass, with a truth. And when we come to believe that and see that, and we then believe that our truth isn't more important or more valuable than someone else's truth, we start to be able to come in relationship with other people and say, oh, like, I want to hear what you believe, and what you believe does not mean that I need to believe that. I don't need to impose that on you. I want to deeply understand you, because then we become clear, like me, I can stand in my worth. I can love myself. I can have faith and believe in saying my voice, speaking my voice in the world, even if you disagree, because I am no longer so dependent on your approval for me to love myself. So then I get to speak what's true for me. But I also become a person who gives you permission to speak what's true for you. So I become ultimately selfless. And in fact, the more my cup is filled, the more that I am no longer seeking for your approval and your validation and you to meet all of my needs, and wishing and kind of jockeying, or as Brene Brown says, hustling for my worth. I become capable of focusing on other things. I have the capacity to notice how I impact you. I have the capacity to notice beyond my own self-absorbed person that I am. And believe me, I just want to say, I've been there. I still can be there. It's not like I'm like, oh, I'm arrived. I'm some like self-loving savant or something like that. I notice this lighting here is really bothering me. I want to move my camera a little bit. Okay. So self-love is really truly getting to the place where I have fulfilled my own attachment needs. So I shored up my attachment needs. I have healed from the traumas that I've suffered in my childhood, whether they're little teeny tiny traumas of disappointments and pain, or big huge traumas of abuse and other mistreatments. We heal those we connect to our hearts and our bodies so that we get out of our heads that's totally based on survival and into our hearts where we can actually tap into our true self. We build courage and emotional resilience. We orient toward loving all of ourselves. And that requires us to do what I think is one of the most important pieces of self love. And when I talk about redefining self love, this is what I really mean is that we are not only loving the parts of ourselves that we feel proud of, but we go back and we find all of the parts of ourselves that we've rejected and exiled over the years because other people have determined those are bad behaviors. And by the way, they might be not pro-social behaviors. So like, for example, the impulse to hit somebody. But we still have to go back and acknowledge that every human being has the impulse to do these things. We have the impulse to hit and hurt and lie. We have the impulses to protect, even if it means that we have to hurt another person. Like maybe even if you had to, like if you were put in the worst of circumstances, you could murder, right? So we all have these places in us that we've rejected. We've said like that's a bad person. Like bad people do that. Bad people manipulate. Bad people or like laziness. Like laziness and neediness is like pervasive, that people are like carrying that as like a bad characteristic. When we come in and we meet all parts of ourselves, and we don't have to be them, but we have to get to know those parts and befriend them so that we then become in choice in life rather than letting these unconscious things like laziness and neediness and lying, all these things, otherwise they just sit underneath the surface and they just sit there underneath all these things. And then when we're at our lowest capacity, they come out. We like lash out at somebody, or we tell a lie to get out of a situation or something like that. So when we're honest with ourselves about it and we say, yeah, yep, I have the potential to do that. If I'm in the right or wrong circumstances, I could do that. We then start to or I have done that and I've really worked hard to not be that way, but I've worked hard to be that way by rejecting that. We then come back in, oh, okay, why does a person lie? Why does a person cheat? Why does a person do these things? Understanding the needs and the feelings underneath it and starting to get in again, shoring up those parts of ourselves, they build this resilience so that we actually become in choice in the world. And the ultimate freedom we have is to be choosing our behaviors, not to be having our behaviors run by our survival brain, by our ego defense mechanism. So to answer the question of whether it makes us more self-focused or self-absorbed or egotistical, I would say it is the exact opposite. And the myth is that by being nice, like I'm being a nice, polite, politically correct person, I am somehow a better, more virtuous person, versus if you're being your authentic self. And sometimes other people have to be disappointed by that sometimes that is not a nice person. So that the myth is like you must self-sacrifice, people please, and self-deprecate and abandon yourself in order for you to be a kind, good person. And if you want to be true to yourself, you're somehow selfish because you say no to people, because you set boundaries, because you ask for what you need, because you're willing to say, I do feel beautiful today, or yeah, I did do a great job, or I am a good person. That those things make you somehow a bad, egotistical person when you're really literally living the truth of who you are. And I'm going to go into one final piece is like, if you believe that you have been created by something bigger than us, maybe God. I'm going to use the word God for the moment because I think it's like a little bit hyperbolic maybe, but it's like to make the point. If you were created by God in the image of God, and then you show up here and you never truly be you, aren't you kind of flipping the bird to God? Weren't we each made with our own little unique personalities and with our quirks and our strengths and our weaknesses and our little like idiosyncrasies, and even maybe like to be born in the family we were born into with the specific traumas and difficulties and challenges that we are faced with. And our real job is to learn how to live this life in this body, whether you like it or not, to come to love this body, your particular set of characteristics, your particular ways of being in this world. And isn't that the work, is to literally be our true selves? Like, I mean, otherwise, what is the point of life? Like, it seems like the point of life is to live fully as me. Like, I didn't get the blessing and the gift of being a human, which I think might be a true gift and a blessing. I incarnated into this body to live this life. And I'm sure that there many people are saying, well, but I don't live that great of a life. My life is rough. But still, what about the blessing of being a human, of being alive? Like, what about that blessing? And how do we make the best of whatever situations we are in, make the best of the traumas that we have lived through, and learn how to heal them, because we are all healable. We are all whole. We're just living this kind of life that feels like it's not whole, but we have to go back and reclaim all these parts of ourselves that we've sort of said, that's not part of me, that's not part of me, I don't want to be part of that, I don't want to feel that feeling, I don't want to experience that again, I don't want to remember that thing that happened again, I don't ever want that to happen to me. So we spend our whole lives resisting all these things, and all these fragments of ourselves are all out here, and we just need to pull them back in to wholeness, into the truth of who we are, and be that. Even if the other people, some people, won't like us. That is one of the hardest things for me to have been dealing with, and I've been dealing with this for like all these years. Is like, and I still have a hard time with the idea that like I may repel people, but I will also attract people. And it's so hard for me to take the risk of the repelling of people, because I just want to be loved. And I want to be accepted. And so it is a very hard thing to be courageous enough to be our true selves at the risk of disappointing people, possibly making other people uncomfortable, and also them not liking us. But ultimately, it's like, how do we live this life in integrity? I don't want to die saying that I never lived my life true to myself, because I was so scared that all I did was just tried to make other people like me. Or I just tried to like please people so that they wouldn't hurt me. Or I stood so strong in controlling, because that's a tendency of mine, so that I could keep other people separate from me. So I could keep myself safe. Like, if I can control everyone and my situation and my circumstances, then I feel safer. But I don't want to live my life that way. At the end of my life, I want to say I lived my life fully. I lived my life true to myself. I had fun. I even like appreciated me, and I had deep gratitude for my life. Like, people talk about privilege, and they're like, oh, basically like it's bad to have privilege. But I look at it and I say, but isn't it a waste if I do have privilege to like play small and play dumb? Like, why not like take advantage of the things that we are privileged in and see them and have gratitude? Like, oh gosh, I am so thankful that I'm living this life. How can I be in service of other people, because I am so fortunate? And how can I be like, when I was steeped in my trauma, my attachment wounding, my people pleasing, my controlling, my fear of disappointing other people, when I was steeped in all of that, I will tell you, my capacity to see how I impacted other people was minimal, so tiny. My ability to serve other people, if it wasn't in the best interest of me, was tiny, because I was so consumed with feeling safe and good, that even though I did good things, like I was on the PTA and all of that stuff, I volunteered, I've created organizations, I donate money, like all those things, but a lot of them were coming from, some of them come from virtuous like places, some of them truly come from just me wanting to be in support of things, but a lot of times it was also, why am I willing to give this much? Because I want to fit in, or I want to be helpful so that other people like me. I want to be generous because that's a good virtue. And I was trying, and so there is real value in trying to be a good person. But if being the good person means that you then are abandoning yourself because you're orienting around what you should do rather than believing that you truly just are a good person and then being the person you are, um, I really think that ultimately we're not really being that, like, what's the word for it? I guess that virtuous person we think we are. We're often doing it from the ego defense mechanism, from this place of trying to get our needs met, this place of being looking good and looking virtuous. And then the myth or the story is that people who are um, setting boundaries and who are living in integrity with themselves and who speak their truth and who are willing to disappoint you and who are even willing to take the risk of triggering another person by being true to themselves. So, in other words, they won't abandon themselves to make sure that you won't get angry or upset. Those things have the perception of not being a good person, but actually, ultimately, what is a good person? I mean, what is a good person? Is it a good person self abandoning and self sacrificing? I mean, it seems hard for me to believe that that's truly a good person. I think that that's usually a person who is living in fear and is afraid to be their true selves. And I think that there's a massive element of self love that's self trust, which is believing that you deeply are a good person. Because sometimes what we do is we believe we are a flawed person because we have been told by so many people that we're bad girls. We're a little bad girl, and you need to be a good girl, and your judgment is bad, and you do bad things, and you need me to tell you what to do. And so then we grow up into this adult who believes that we do bad things. If somebody else doesn't tell us what to do, then we are going to be a bad girl. And we have to reclaim the part of us that actually is inherently a good person. I have yet to meet somebody, really, I have yet to meet people like, say, my clients. I have yet to meet a person who is not an absolutely awesome, good, decent person inside, and they're afraid they're not. Often people are afraid they're not. So that is why I believe that self love and living an authentic life, living a life true to yourself, is really the magic. That's the sweet sauce to not be egotistical, to not be narcissistic, to not be self-absorbed. It's the pathway to get us to the place where we literally have the capacity and the depth of self-love that we don't have to be always focused on getting our own needs met, and we can look outside and be so generous and able to see how can we help other people get their needs met. It's like if I become so in tune with myself and I listen to myself, I become a better listener to others. I become capable of hearing you even when you say something that upsets me, or that I disagree with. It won't get me absolutely thrown off because I'm not so worried about my own pain. So that's the secret to it, right? It's so complicated if you're not fully in it. But and I tell people sometimes you just have to have faith that this is the solution, this is the way. But we can't get stuck. We can't get stuck in it. We often get stuck. Everything, every time we do these things, we kind of get stuck. A lot of things in the personal development space are meant to be stages and steps, not places that we stay stuck in them. So I encourage you to think about it from that perspective, that you may feel like you are so hyper focused on yourself that there's something wrong with that, but that is a stage in the journey. It's like going back to being a child and allowing yourself to actually say, I do deserve, an hour a day to totally focus on myself. I do deserve to say no to things I said yes to before because it's not in alignment, even if it looks like I'm being selfish. What I'm really doing is just taking back. I'm just taking back what's mine. I'm taking back what's mine. So ultimately, I can be the whole person who has the capacity and self-love and depth of connection and connection to my heart, that I can actually be generous. I can be in service. I can be love. I can literally be love. That, I think, is the mission. That's the goal. So when we are self-loving, we become love. Okay, so I totally get that this may not resonate with everybody at the moment and the point where you are in your life, but I want to invite you to consider the possibility that when we get to that depth of self-love, it is paradigm shifting. I'm of the mind that it is the solution to our world's problems, that when you are self-loving, you cannot do harm to others in the way you can do when you are hurting and feeling unheard and resentful and bitter. When you're feeling all those feelings, we have so much risk to cause harm. In the midst of those times of my life when I was blaming and criticizing and feeling in pain, I would hurt people unconsciously. So often I didn't mean to hurt people. But it is now through my consciousness of all parts of myself to know that I am at risk. I can cause harm. And to love myself enough to say, but that's out of integrity with who I am. And to have the capacity and awareness to be able to choose in a given situation how I'm going to show up. And if I show up that way, is that in integrity with who I am and who I want to be and how I want to treat people? Even if that person's hurting me, I get to make those decisions. And I really believe that that is what we need, as people who have the capacity to be able to understand the impact of their choices, the longer term unintended consequences of things that they do, the way they impact another person's heart, to be able to feel how their heart is being impacted in any given moment, and be able to speak it rather than act it out in all kinds of like wobbly unconscious ways. So I so invite you to get on the journey, this journey of self-love, because it is truly the inner work that is the key to creating the beautiful world that we all know we can create, and to truly creating the better life that you wish to be living. Okay, namaste, my friends. Bye.